Welcome back to Shifting to Solids. Today we're going to be talking about the Transform 3D tool in Onshape. So like always, let's get started with a sketch. So let's click that top plane, hold down Shift and S on the keyboard, press the letter N to normalize and P to hide those planes. So if you want to follow along, this is what we're going to do. I have all my units set in inches, or freedom units like I like to call it. So we're going to start with a center point rectangle using the shortcut key R. I'm going to click my origin and just drag out, make a 10 by 10 rectangle. Okay, and you can do that by pressing 10 on your keyboard, enter, and then it'll auto-populate to the other side. After that, what I want to do is we're going to draw a corner rectangle, and again, you can come up here to the top on this drop-down. You'll see where they all live, and if you ever like wondering what the shortcut key is, it always has that there next to it. So I'm going to press the letter G, or I could just click right here, corner rectangle, and I'm going to do a rectangle that comes off of this corner and comes down 2 by 2. However, I wanted to show you another way to do this. So I'm going to press 2, enter 2, okay? And you might be used to using the transform tool that lives up here in 2D. Today we're going to be talking about the 3D version, but for this argument, I want these two to coincide with one another. So another way you can do this without moving things is to click both points after you've dimensioned it and press the letter I for coincide, and it'll automatically move that there. So let's back out. After I have that square, what I'm going to want to do, I'm going to come draw some circles. So we're going to do a center point circle, just kind of off into space right here that needs to be 2 inches on the outside, and we're going to do a center point circle inside that will be 1 inch on the inside. And last but not least, we're going to take our inscribed polygon tool up here at the top. And again, there is no shortcut for that. So we'll click there. And I'm just going to drop a hexagon down here. I want that to have 6 sides. So I'm going to click accept. And I want the diameter of that inside circle to be 4. And then I'm going to draw another one inside of that. That is 2. We're going to go ahead and click that green check mark to accept our sketch. I could have drawn these all separate, but I like getting everything drawn in one go. So now we're going to go to solid. We'll shift E to extrude. And I want everything for this first. So I'm just going to be making a rectangle. However, I want it to go 1 inch in the opposite direction. So I'll click that arrow, we'll accept that, and now I have a blank plate that we're going to work with. We're going to move some stuff around on. But what are we going to move around? We're going to turn our sketch back on by unchecking that eyeball. Remember, eye open means you can see it, eye closed means you can't. So let's turn that eye on. We'll come back over here. What I want to do now is I'm going to come in and I want to select all the geometry that I want to be extruded. And what's cool is you can do this all at one go. So we're going to do Shift E again. However, what we want, you'll notice that they're all the same colors because we are on this add feature right here. Okay. If I click right here where it says new, and I back out so we can see it all again, you'll see it gives me 3 different colors, 4 different colors if we count that base, because I want 4 different parts. And if we check down here, down in the bottom, you will see that I have 4 different parts, where if I left it on add, like I did here, let's come back down, you see I just have 1 big part. So let's make sure we're on new, solid, and we'll make those 1 inch as well. I'll go ahead and click that green check mark to accept. And now we get to play with the transform tool. So what I'm going to do is take this from a top view. So I'm going to come over here to my view cube and click top. And then we're going to come up here and look at transform. So we did split last week, transforms right here. So if we hover over, it'll give me the description of that. And it says to move, rotate, copy, or scale a part, transform by mate connectors or translate by line, distance, or XYZ. Now that's a lot, and there's a lot of different ways we can move. So if we go ahead and click it, let's start with the easy one. So first off, entities to transform or copy. So I could pick each individual part, but I'm just going to start with this rectangle right here. Okay. And we could say translate by line. So by line, what it's going to ask, if we move to this left side, you'll see I can pick a line. So if I pick down here and I pick this line, you'll see it kind of came towards me. However, if I click this line, it's going to go along that line. So whatever line you pick, okay, you could even use these lines off of that hexagon and it'll kind of go at that angle. I can go with this line right here instead, right? There's a lot of different ways you could go, but it has to follow some sort of line. Clicking here, you'll notice it doesn't like that because it's not actually a line, it's a curve, and it doesn't know where to place it. So if you're thinking, oh, I could do like a curved pattern using the transform, that's not what it's for. That's why we have that curved pattern. So I want to do this, and you'll see translate by line, right? And it just kind of places it somewhere. So I don't really like that because it doesn't really give you I can flop directions, but it's all based off of how long that line is. So if you pre-drawn it in a sketch, you probably already placed it where you want it to. So I don't really see the point for translate by line, but maybe you're doing it to copy a part. What's cool here, you'll notice we already have 4 parts down here, but if I click this checkbox that says copy part, you'll see it'll add that as its own part instead of moving that one. So if I keep it unchecked, I still have my originals. Let's go ahead and accept it. I've just moved that square from there to there, where if I go back and I click copy part, I'll say, okay, that original one sits there, but it also made a copy translated off of that line that we did. So let's go back in and let's pick translate by distance. Okay. So same thing. It's going to ask what entities do you want to transform or copy? And this time we're going to pick our circle, our part number 3, and it's saying direction. Okay. So if you hover over it, it says translation by distance requires 2 vertices, an edge, a plane, or a cylindrical face. So if I click direction, I could click this line, and then I could tell it I want it to move 2 inches, not 21 inches, 2 inches in that direction. I could say I want it to move -2, and it doesn't like that. So if you're trying to swap it, you would go 2 and then flop the direction, okay? I know some of you guys have been liking the fact that you can do the algebra with this, and it's not as intuitive in all the aspects. If you're doing a formula in a dimension, it'll let you do it. But for some of these 3D tools that we talk about, you have to use that flip arrow for the opposite direction. And again, if we do copy part, if I leave it unchecked, it's going to just move the original instance. If I click copy, it's going to make another copy of that. So let's tell it 5 inches, and we'll move it over there and say okay. And you'll see now my original geometry where I sketched it and extruded it 5 inches away from that, it threw it up that direction. Go back into transform and let's edit it again. So instead of this one, let's drop down, translate by X, Y, Z. So I'm going to pick that part 3 again, and you'll see I get this nice modifier, right? I have 3 squares and I have 3 arrows, and essentially what those are, they map out to your 3 axes. So if we follow my Y, my X, and my Z, so translate by X, Y, Z, it makes sense, right? If I wanted to move this, that'll move linear on that plane. You'll see moving it this way is moving my Y number up and down. If I move this arrow, I can do that. If I move this arrow, it's going to move it on the Z. So what are these for? Well, I can move it kind of freehand, and all the values change at the same time, okay? I feel like if you're going to use the transform tool, you know exactly where you're trying to move this. So let's say I needed it to move 2 inches from its original location on the X, I needed it to move half an inch up on the Y, and I wanted it to be 3 inches above the original surface. You'll see it's done all 3 of those. And if we look at from kind of a top and then like an ISO view, you'll see it has moved from that location. I can say copy. Same thing, that copy part button does the same thing as it does in all of these. And I'll say accept, and you'll see I end up with that moved in the exact location that I wanted it to be. Okay, so we'll go ahead and leave that one there. And we'll do another transform so we can keep some stuff and edit it around some other stuff. So let's do transform again. Entities to transform. Let's go to our hexagon this time. And we're going to go to transform by mate connectors. So if I come at this from the side, you'll see the reason I picked the hexagon is there's a lot of mate connectors, right? So I could transform by this point here, and I could move it to this face here. And you'll see, because I picked the top of my piece and I picked the top of this piece, it embedded them into one another. Well, maybe that's what you want to do, and you want to do a Boolean. So we'll say copy part. I could rotate about that mate connector. I could flip the direction. Let's put it right there. We'll say okay. Then I could come and do what we did last week. I could do a Boolean. I want to subtract. And this time I don't want to keep that tool. I want the target to be the base plate, and I want the tool to be my piece here. And we'll say okay. I don't want to keep the tool. Let's cut that out. And we'll say boom. And now I have that part copied, and I could go in and delete that part right there in order to get the geometry that I need. So that's transform by mate connectors. Okay. We want to do another transform. This time, transform, and it's going to be rotate. So maybe I need this square. We'll pick that. Same thing as always. You look at that blue box, entities to transform or copy. I'm going to use this rectangle in the top, or the square in the top left corner. And I want to rotate. And I can rotate about an axis. So if I turn my plane back on, I could rotate about you'll see I would need some geometry on here. Sometimes some rotations and like mirrors allow you to use the planes, and some programs allow this, but the way this works, it doesn't. So my axis, what could I pick? I could pick any line that will act as an axis. You see, as I move around, it starts to kind of come up. But mate connectors also will be working. So let's say I wanted to rotate about its own axis on this corner here. I could use that to pivot, and then I would tell it I want that to be 45 degrees. Cool. That's what I got, right? Maybe I don't want that axis. I want it to rotate about this axis right here. And I need it to go 97.25 degrees. Well, there you go. Now it's rotating about there. I want it to rotate about that origin, though. I would click off of that and select my mate connector, and I would just click my origin. And now I can rotate it all the way around that piece however I want to, based off of where it's sitting. So let's go 30 degrees. Now, this one, if I did negative 30, again, this one allows you to do negative numbers. So keep that in mind. Some of these features, you're like, okay, well, transform, I can't use negative. Well, you can't in the translate by distance, but you can in the rotate. So we'll go ahead and leave that there, keep it on rotate, and we'll copy that part. So we'll say, okay, we'll do another transform. This time we're going to go down to copy and place. And this time I'm going to copy this exact, we'll do the hexagon one again. I'm going to copy it in place. And so what's that going to do? Why don't I have very many options? Well, because it's copying it in place. It's imagining two of them existing in the same exact location. So problem with copying is that there's two there. So if I come here and we'll find my original, there's part 3. If I shut it off, it's still there because part 8 is also there. So let's turn part 8. We'll go and edit that appearance. We'll make this like a red color. Okay. If I turn part 3 back on, you'll see it's kind of hard to see because they're both existing in the exact same spot. So turning part 8 off, turning part 3 on. Sometimes you'll get that shaded area. But right now, maybe if we pick a different color, let's see what happens. We'll go edit appearance. Let's give it like that a darker blue color. We'll say okay. Turn both on. Yeah, so because they exist in the exact same spot, it's showing me that I knew that I copied it in place. So why would I use that? Well, let's go back to transform. And let's use our last one, which is scale. So maybe I want this piece, part number 8, to be scaled up times 4. So the scale factor is, I want this to be 4 times bigger than what it is. Now I have to pick my point or mate connector. Notice there's a scale uniformly. And most of the time when you're scaling things, you want them to scale uniformly, but we'll do this normal first and then we'll uncheck that and I'll show you what it does. And this time I want it to scale about that same area. So you'll see I've blown that guy up 4 times its original size. And if I click copy part, again, it will add another part. But since we already copied that, it is already a copy, I'm going to leave that unchecked. And we'll say okay. And now it exists as a brand new part, 4 times bigger than what it needed to be. And actually, I'm going to go back and make that 8 times bigger. So it will, maybe we'll go 10. So it's bigger than my part. There we go. So now it's encased inside of here. Okay. If we go back to transform 5 though, and we change it to scale, we uncheck scale uniformly, I can scale it in a multitude of directions. So you'll see I now get an X scale, a Y scale, and a Z scale. Okay, we're still about the same mate connector, but this time maybe I want it to scale in the X direction, on the X 2 times bigger, that way. Y I want it to be 4 times bigger, and Z I need it, we'll do 6 times bigger, 2, 4, and 6. Okay, so you'll see it's taking my geometry that exists and giving it different variations. We'll say okay. And if I go and shut everything off and turn only part 8 on, I now have a really cool kind of, I don't know, whatever you want to make out of it, 3D printing some sort of bracket or looks like a piece for a costume or something. But that's how that transform feature works. So get used to playing with a bunch of different versions, and honestly draw something and move it around and manipulate it. The biggest help that this will do for you, and I haven't talked about them all that far in depth yet, but if you're doing, if you're going to move over to the assembly tab, a lot of what you learn in this transform, they don't really have a transform button in assembly. They do, but it's kind of just, it gives you this, this piece here where you do the translate X, Y, Z, you get this kind of movement manipulator piece, and they just expect you to kind of know that. So learn it in here, practice it in here. So when you go to start assembling things, especially that and with mate connectors, that'll help you kind of place things where you want them to go. So that's going to do it for us today. Hopefully you guys are learning lots and figuring out the bits and pieces, and we're running into the spot where we've pretty much done everything for basic 3D modeling. What we're moving on to, the next couple things are like wrap and decal. Those are more for like surfacing, deleting parts, other than just clicking delete part over here. Modifying fillets, again, those are more some surface things. So I think next week I'm going to skip into the plane feature, because that's big when you're doing multi-level geometry, basing things off of each other, and then moving into some actual projects, because I think we've hit our basics. I know the helix, that's more for threads. There's all these offset curves, and a lot of that is basic when you're talking more surfacing. And then mate connectors and all these other things I haven't even touched. We might do a whole series on frames, gussets, end caps, how to do all that. Sheet metal is a whole other monster in of itself. So hope you guys are liking this. Again, comment down below and tell me what you guys are thinking. If there's something more you want, or if you need me to explain something a little more in depth, more than willing to help out. But thanks you guys for being a part of the channel, and I'll see you guys next time.